The snow fell thick over Redemption Creek on Christmas Eve 1882, blanketing the dusty streets in white silence. Inside the Grand Saloon, Marcus Blackwood sat alone at a corner table, his weathered hands wrapped around a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched. At 53, the cattle baron had everything a man could want: 3,000 acres, 200 head of cattle, a mansion on the hill, and absolutely no one to share it with. His wife Sarah had died giving birth 15 years ago, taking their stillborn son with her. Since that frozen December night, Marcus had shut himself away from the world, his heart as barren as the winter plains. This year something had cracked inside him. Maybe it was seeing families through frosted windows, children laughing, or perhaps it was simply that he was tired of being alone. On impulse, he'd placed an advertisement in the town newspaper. Widow with child needed for Christmas dinner, good pay. 1 evening only. It seemed absurd even to him, purchasing companionship like supplies from the general store. But desperation made men do strange things. When Catherine Wells appeared at his door that evening, Marcus almost didn't recognize the hollowed-out woman as the vibrant schoolteacher's wife he'd known years ago. Her husband had died in a mine collapse last spring, leaving her with nothing but debts and a 6-month-old baby girl named Hope. Catherine's dress was clean but threadbare, her shawl patched in 3 places, and her eyes carried the exhaustion of someone who'd been fighting too long. She held baby Hope against her chest, wrapped in a faded quilt. Marcus stepped aside wordlessly, gesturing them into the warmth. The mansion's dining room had been prepared by his housekeeper, a magnificent spread of roasted turkey, potatoes, vegetables, and pie, enough food to feed 10 people. Catherine's eyes widened at the sight, and Marcus saw her swallow hard. They sat at opposite ends of the long mahogany table, the baby between them in a makeshift cradle fashioned from a laundry basket. The silence was suffocating at first, broken only by the crackling fire and occasional coos from Hope. Marcus tried to make conversation, asking about Catherine's circumstances, but his words came out stiff and formal, like a business transaction. Catherine answered politely, her pride evident even in her poverty. She wasn't here for charity. Her posture said she was here because she'd been hired for a job, and she'd fulfill her obligation with dignity. Then Hope began to fuss. Catherine reached for her, but Marcus surprised himself by saying, "May I?" Catherine hesitated, then nodded, placing the warm bundle in his arms. The moment Hope's tiny weight settled against his chest, something inside Marcus shattered. 15 years of carefully constructed walls came tumbling down. The baby looked up at him with dark, curious eyes, then reached out one impossibly small hand and grabbed his calloused finger. Her grip was strong, determined, alive. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face before he even realized he was crying. This child, this perfect little being who had no idea about loss or loneliness or the cruel ways life could break a man's heart, looked at him with such complete trust. Hope gurgled and smiled, a toothless grin that seemed to say everything would be all right. Catherine watched from across the table, her own eyes glistening. For the first time in 15 years, Marcus Blackwood felt something other than emptiness. He felt needed. He felt alive. And as he held that baby girl close, listening to her contented sighs, he understood that sometimes God answers prayers you didn't even know you'd been praying. That Christmas dinner lasted until dawn. After the meal, they moved to the parlor where Marcus built up the fire until the room glowed warm as summer. Catherine nursed Hope while Marcus, for the first time in 15 years, talked about Sarah. He told stories about their courtship, their dreams of filling the big house with children, the devastating silence that had followed her death. Catherine listened without judgment, occasionally sharing her own grief about losing Thomas in that mine collapse, about the terror of being alone with a newborn and no prospects. They spoke as two souls who'd walked through darkness and somehow found themselves in the same room, the same moment, against all odds. As the night deepened, something remarkable happened. Hope, usually fussy with strangers according to Catherine, settled completely in Marcus's arms, sleeping peacefully against his chest. Marcus held her as if she were made of glass, this tiny miracle that weighed nothing and somehow everything at once. Catherine dozed in the armchair, finally allowing herself to rest, and Marcus kept vigil over both of them, this makeshift family that had assembled itself in his lonely mansion on Christmas Eve. When morning light filtered through the windows, Marcus made a decision that would change all their lives. He didn't want this to end. He couldn't bear the thought of Catherine and Hope returning to whatever cold room they'd been surviving in. Couldn't imagine going back to his empty existence. So he made an offer, stumbling over words like a nervous schoolboy. He proposed that Catherine become his housekeeper permanently, with private rooms for her and Hope, fair wages and security. It wasn't a marriage proposal, both. Their wounds were too fresh for that. But it was something more important. A lifeline, a second chance. A family built from broken pieces. Catherine studied him for a long moment, and Marcus braced himself for rejection. But then she nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, we'll stay." Over the following months, the mansion transformed. Hope's laughter echoed through halls that had known only silence. Catherine's touches appeared everywhere, flowers and vases, curtains pulled back to let in light, the smell of fresh bread filling rooms that had felt like a mausoleum. Marcus found himself rushing home from the ranch each evening, eager to hear about Hope's latest accomplishment, rolling over, grabbing her toes, babbling nonsense that sounded almost like words. As Hope grew, she became the bridge between two wounded souls learning to live again. Her first steps were taken between Marcus and Catherine's outstretched arms. Her first word was "Papa," directed at Marcus, who wept openly and without shame. By Hope's second Christmas, Marcus and Catherine had fallen in love the way autumn falls into winter. Gradually, inevitably, naturally, they married that spring in a simple ceremony with Hope as their flower girl. Scattering petals everywhere except down the aisle, Marcus legally adopted Hope, giving her his name and his heart. Years later, when Hope had children of her own, she'd ask Marcus to tell the story of how their family began. He'd smile and say that sometimes God sends angels in the smallest packages, that a baby's grip can be stronger than grief, and that Christmas miracles aren't about magic, they're about broken people brave enough to let love in one more time. The cattle baron who'd had everything but was empty had finally found what he'd been missing. Not wealth or status, but the simple grace of being needed, of loving and being loved in return, of a baby's trust showing him that his heart could still beat for something other than sorrow. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming, Wild West tales that remind us of the power of hope, second chances, and unexpected miracles. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss a story. Share this with someone who needs to remember that it's never too late for new beginnings. Every story we tell is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Join our community of believers in happy endings.